Hey, hello everyone. We welcome one, we welcome all to episode two of what is slowly morphing from a discussion to a perspective. The last time it was the ODI discussion, today it becomes the ODI perspective. From here on, it will be a perspective from the ODI point of view, like we had mentioned in the first episode. As always, Sashwat here, and my friend, philosopher, and guide VB on the other side.
I
ठीक है. So we start off on a topic which we had slightly mentioned. We had a mere mention of it in our first episode. We wanted to deliberate on it further. I remember having told our viewers that this is one topic which needs a separate episode on its own. This episode would be completely dedicated to left-wing extremism in India. Left-wing extremism as in the communist ideology, and to what extent are they pushing it in India, both in terms of ideological brainwashing as well as the sheer use of strength and force in terms of guns, bullets, and so on and so forth. So without much ado, as always, I'll let my friend here start off the proceedings. We'll try to understand the origin of left-wing left-wing extremism in India, and how it started off in India, what was its growth phase, and thereon we'll try to understand the various aspects of how it was controlled, and we'll take it from there on. Maybe over to you.
thank you, Sajid. So, addressing what is actually the white elephant in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Left-wing extremism in India has a long history that even predates India's independence. In fact, the first known left-wing movement in India started in 1946, a year before the independence. It happened in what is now the state of Telangana. It went on for around 5 years. It ended in 1951. It was basically a peasant uprising.
Uh-huh.
But this is also the way the left and its movements work across the world. It is mostly a peasant-backed revolution. It's a working class struggle.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest example of this is the Nazi Party. The Nazi Party rose to popularity on the basis of the working class struggle. So it was obviously no different in India. But the biggest event that actually kick-started and made it into an organized syndicate of criminals. This happened in 1967. It was on 25th of May that year. That the Adivasis, the peasants, the landless laborers, formed a group and started attacking a landlord in a village, a hamlet that's called Naxalbari, and that's where the name comes, that it is a Naxalite movement. It was
Oh.
led by a man I think most of you will relate to. His name is Charu Majumdar, and he had
Yes.
two very charismatic associates, Kanu Sanyal and Jungle Santhal. And these people had immense amount of help and
Mm-hmm.
support from the Communist Party of China.
Mm-hmm.
The Communist Party's mouthpiece, People's Daily, dedicated an entire page to this movement in India and called it the Spring Thunder. Imagine.
The what?
The Spring Thunder.
Okay. Okay.
That this is what it was called. And in fact, Charu Sanyal both took immense inspiration from Mao Zedong, China's founding father,
Right.
and they modeled their own, you know, the preamble, the policies, the tactics,
Mm-hmm.
to not just to fight back, but also to usurp political power. All of these movements were born out of the ideas of the Chinese Communist Party. And
Uh,
eventually, of course, as it went on,
uh-huh.
it became very, very different from what it had started off as.
Started off as, yes. Maybe two
It,
doubts here. I have two doubts
yeah, yeah,
here, and this is something even I got to know today itself. So you mean
okay,
to say that the Nazi Party, which
yeah, yeah.
became an extremist right wing, and they became genocidal, had its roots in left wing ideology, is it?
Uh, in fact, you'd be very surprised to know what the Nazi Party is called.
And it is called what?
It is called the Nationalist. I think it's called the National Socialist German Workers' Party.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So the Nazi Party, of course, it can always be debated that the Nazi party was the instrument of the far right, but it was born out of a socialist movement. It
And that
was
is
a
the
working
outcome
class
it
people's
had.
party.
Its outcome, I mean, gradually it shifted towards a far right. Eventually, what it became was a far right party. It closed borders, German supremacy, this, that. The ideology may have started off as left wing, which is surprising. Personally, I am
Yeah,
really surprised that the Nazi party had its roots in socialism. But yeah, I mean, Nazis, yeah.
yeah. In fact, Mussolini's fascism
Yes.
also has socialist roots. The
Okay.
economic policies of the fascist party
Okay.
were very, very left in nature.
Okay.
Uh, of course, Hitler is accused of trying to fuse the left and the right. So socially, he
Hmm.
was very socialist in nature.
Okay.
When it came to his economics, he was very capitalist in nature. So of course, it was a mishmash of both.
Mishmash.
But the Nazi Party was, formed out of a socialist uprising. It was formed of the working class people. It was formed of the peasants. It was not formed of the rich oligarchs.
Okay, maybe as a protest against the rich oligarchy, right?
Yes, yes,
But
and
ultimately,
the
huh.
anti-immigration agenda, the
Mhm,
anti-immigration agenda of the Nazi Party
mhm.
also stems from the discontent among the middle class, not out of the discontentment of the rich.
Okay, okay, okay. But
Most anti-immigration agenda across the world is is
is
born
the
out of the discontent of the middle class.
middle class, yes. And but ultimately, what mattered to Hitler was to have power, come what may, be
Absolutely,
it the left or the right, right?
absolutely.
Okay, okay. This is my first doubt. My second, I mean, it's not a doubt, but just wanted to shine some light on the enigmatic personality that was Charu Majumdar, right?
Yes,
Why I
yes.
asked this very specifically is, I mean, the way it stands in India and the way it is, maybe I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but Majumdar, I mean, Charu Majumdar necessarily did not belong to the lower strata of the society, or did he? Or was he a member?
No, not the lowest start of the society. He was,
Yes.
of course, among the disenchanted folks, but
Okay.
definitely not
Not he was
the
not from the, but he fought for the Naxal Badi movement as well. He was a torch bearer, in fact. He started it all, right?
but yes, yes.
Interesting, interesting. So it always happens. Anyways, yeah, yeah, please. So my follow-up question, where I wish you to, I mean, enlighten us is, how
Yes.
did it grow? This is where we
Yeah.
know now that Naxal Badi and its roots, origins lie in West Bengal in a particular village hamlet called Naxal Badi, right? And that is where the Naxal movement
Naxalbari.
started. We got the name of Naxalism and all. Now, how did
Yes.
it grow from there?
So it was on 16th of July 1972 when Charu was arrested,
Hmm.
and he apparently died in police custody, which created, of course, a huge uproar amongst the masses. Of course, not many people knew about him. Had
Hmm.
it happened in 2020, in the age of social media,
Hmm.
you would have an entire revolution born out of his death.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Correct.
India got away easy in 1970. After
Hmm.
his death, I think the security forces started undermining the Naxal movement. And of course, the movement was crushed to death. At least for the next few years, I think it was in early 1982 when you had Kondapalli Sitaramaiah.
Yes, I've
He
heard
was
of
the
him.
one who revived this movement
Hmm.
through a group called the People's War Group. This was
Oh.
formed in 1980, but around 1982,
Hmm.
they started spreading the roots in Andhra Pradesh. So this
Okay.
was the birth of the left-wing extremism down the
Hmm.
south of the country.
Now, my
And this
doubt
is
is,
how, yeah,
my doubt is, what is the core point of the Naxal movement in India? The core point is that they were supposedly oppressed by the higher ups, the zamindar class, right? And they
yes,
had an armed uprising against them. That was the
yes,
binding factor, be it West Bengal or be it Andhra Pradesh. But what was the
yes.
ultimate objective? To get power at both the state and central level, or even move beyond?
Uh, See, you'll have to break it down.
Okay.
Look, in West Bengal, the uprising was mostly by Adivasis, by the poor, the landless laborers
Hmm.
against a landlord. They were raiding the granaries, right? They
Okay.
wanted food. They weren't looking for power.
Okay.
Of course, as the movement matured, I think Majumdar's policies took it to a level where it was very ambitious about grabbing power. But it was actually Sitaramayya's PWG that created this charter for themselves that yes, we can grab power in the state, and that's why they were able to attack the center of power. They were able to attack policemen. They were able to attack upper caste leaders. They were able to attack politicians, a variety of groups, and not just the landlords. So in
And
Andhra Pradesh,
India
actually where
wasn't
the
prepared at
actual
that point, right? India was not prepared
absolutely
at that point to be able to
yes.
tackle this menace, right?
Absolutely. It almost took them a decade to decimate the PWG. Of
Oh.
course, we thought that this was the end of it.
Mhm,
But in early 2000s, there were smaller groups that were formed, and
mhm,
the Communist Party also became politically more relevant across the country. And there
correct.
was political patronage from
Hmm,
the
hmm.
Communist Party for these groups.
Okay,
See,
okay.
everywhere across the world, how do these troublemongers prosper when there is political patronage?
Huh.
We're not just talking about bribing the police, we're talking about tacit support from the administration. This is something that the local BJP government in
Mhm.
Chhattisgarh has been accused of.
Of
Of
supporting the
being,
Naxal movement?
yes, of being hand in glove with the Naxal movement.
Oh,
So, yes, they've provided the tacit cover. And that's why the Naxal movement grew extremely strong in Chhattisgarh during the local BJP's presence.
okay.
Congress, however, it's very surprising that in Andhra Pradesh it is the Congress that led to the growth of the PWG, but in Chhattisgarh it was the Congress government that cracked down on the
I assume this is the
on
Congress
these.
government under the Ajit Jogi?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. That was the time when the Naxal movement
Mm-hmm.
in Chhattisgarh, the left extremism movement, in fact, in Chhattisgarh was at its height,
Mm-hmm.
and 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 of course they were larger states back then. They were undivided.
Yes.
That was a
Yes.
time when the movement was at its strength. After the division of the states, of course, the police forces were augmented.
Mm-hmm.
The facilities, the infrastructure was augmented.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, that eventually led down to a reduction in a lot of left-wing extremism in these states.
I
Uh,
also think I'm assuming here, I'm just I mean shooting arrows in the dark, but the
yeah,
phase from 80s to the mid 2000s, right?
yeah,
Especially
yes,
say from 85 to 2005, well, there was a large scale political instability at the center as well, because it was the time and era of coalition politics. There were like 12 to
yes,
13 groups who used to assimilate and form power, due to which no particular party at the center had the absolute majority or the political will to take on the Naxal movement head on, which kind of
yes,
led to its growth, along with the tacit approval from the political part of the communist ideology, which is the CPIM and thereabouts, right?
yes, yes.
Okay, okay.
This is interesting that till 2004,
Mm-hmm.
uh, the Indian CPMFs, so Central Paramilitary Forces, had
Mm-hmm.
almost wiped out the left-wing extremism movement by 2004. They were almost done. There was a very sudden renaissance for these forces because they joined hands. The so-called the Communist Party of India, the
Uh,
CPIM.
M.
Then you had the Maoist Leninist division. Then the
Mm-hmm.
PWGs. There were some smaller armed factions. All
Mm-hmm.
of these guys joined hands, and suddenly they
Mm-hmm.
had a bigger operational area. Suddenly they had more intelligence because these guys were talking to each other in different states. So they had more
Mm-hmm.
intelligence. They had better understanding of local topography,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why they became after 2004. The left-wing extremism violence in India actually grew. It grew even in a worse manner than it had grown in the past decade.
Which brings me to 2 points, and I wish you to speak about it so that I and all our viewers can get more idea. That from 80 to 2004, I mean from 82 to
Yes,
2004, our police forces, they got their act together and the state started wiping off the extremism state by state, be it Andhra
because the
Pradesh, be it
movements were very fragmented also. These
right.
movements were very small, they were very fragmented.
Fragmented. There was no unifying force. It was sometime
Yes,
around 2004 that these forces, I mean, these left-wing extremist groups started unifying. Now,
yes,
my question to you would be two questions. Number one is, can you give me those areas where they were most active then and probably now? Areas. I mean, I'm talking about the topography and states, right? And my second question would be, when we talk about intelligence at the level of the left-wing ideology and their forces, what are we talking here? Did they have access to state government level data, or at the admin level, or was it even beyond the state level, at the central level? I mean, they used to get their intelligence from people at the highest echelons of power. So two questions.
Yes, yes. I'll come to the first one first.
Yeah.
Prior to 2004, the Naxals were very active in Dandakaranya. They were in Madhya Pradesh, Odisha, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, large parts of Maharashtra. I can remember as far as I think 200 districts across the country,
200
were affected in some or different way by these forces. I think after 2004, this has mostly been limited to Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, and Andhra Pradesh.
And
These
Odisha
are
is
the
out?
four states that, yeah. Odisha is out. Odisha has been long out. I mean, our, Naxal encounters are now in single digits. They used to be in 3 digits back in 2000.
Okay. I'll come back to this point later on in the episode. Okay.
Yes.
And the
second
second
question that you asked. So look, the Naxal movement, of course, was an ideological movement at the end of the day, and they had people who were propped up by that ideology. They had believers, they had followers. Initially, these were the people, the ragtag Adivasis, holding rifles in the jungles. And eventually it led to these people going out into the cities and the towns and assimilating themselves in the common population.
Mainstream.
What began as distribution of pamphlets, it was also started growing, where they got very friendly with people in the mainstream media, and they started pitching for that ideology. They started plugging what it is called the interviews, because of course what a journalist at that point would say no to a journalist doing an interview with them. So they started using the mainstream media to plug information, and gradually the followers, the people who were following them, their children, when they grew up, they didn't come into the fold directly. They went and they joined educational institutions. They studied there. They studied the modern techniques. They studied the modern ways of life, and then they came back. They came back with the education that their predecessors did not have. So they were more refined in their thinking. They were more sophisticated when it came to tactics. They had a better understanding of how to create narratives. And then came another generation of these left-wing extremists who decided that, okay, we have people who have the guns. Now we need people who have the pens.
Right.
And these were the people who provided the armed militia with the cover
fire
of being an ideological movement. Then they started with literature. They started influencing literature. They started influencing the public discourse. Then they created an entire new narrative that had the government not done this to us, we would not have picked up a gun. And suddenly this narrative became very acceptable. Oh, it's fine. I mean, what if he shot a policeman? The policeman must have shot his family.
Right.
And this became a very acceptable narrative, at least for the middle class Indian.
Right. Let me understand this. So what happened in this time period between these 2 decades or so is that, number one, along with the guns, there were people propped up by this very ideology and this movement who started giving them cover fire by means of writing. Their pen became their sword, right? Like they say, pen is mightier than the sword. So, for example, people like Varavara Rao come into my mind, right? And then there were professors at various institutes. I think Professor Sai Baba has been recently indicted for his ideological leanings.
In Bhima Koregaon,
Yes. That is their first line of defense or offense, if I may say so. The second line of offense became the pliable media. So my understanding is this was the phase, this early 2000s, mid 2000s, when media houses had started bifurcating and trying to make their own presence. And from a media perspective, from a media person's point of view, what better romantic view of India than people being oppressed and then picking up guns to fight the state and the state powers. So like you said, it all gels in. So for these media houses, getting an interview with such people with such ideology and leanings became a matter of pride for them. That they were able to show so-called truth to power. right?
Yes.
So that
Yes.
becomes step 2. Now the step 3, when you, again, I'm just summarizing what you said. So there's a cover fire by these people with pens. There's the cover fire by
Yeah.
media, pliable media, willing to give them a position and a stand and a platform. And the third and the
Absolutely.
last, the bolstering of their armor would be young people with a leaning, left-leaning ideology in their minds, going to institutes of repute and trying to spread the word there using sophisticated means rather than the old days of your wedding. They just spread pamphlets, right?
Yeah.
And making this left-wing ideology more acceptable to normal working class people and students, right?
Yeah.
That is still happening today, maybe in JNU. That is the classic example of left-wing ideology being spread in today's times in JNU, maybe.
True. True. Uh, Look, about GNU, of course. See, everything that is on the left is not exactly related to the left wing extremism as a movement. See, you can always, find the different hierarchies that is
Mm-hmm.
there on the left. We're talking about an ideological movement that tackles working class people's oppression. We
Mm-hmm.
have a different movement that says that farmers must stand up against the oligarchs or the government,
Okay.
whoever it is. And then you have the entire cabal of whistleblowers that must speak truth. So there are different hierarchies on the left.
Okay.
It's not all related to in a way the left
Huh.
wing extremism that we are talking about.
Okay.
The academia has played a big role in shaping people's narrative about what this movement is. That's why,
Exactly. Hmm.
that's why the cinema from the 90s to the late 2000s has always been filled with glorification of Naxals, of communists, of
Correct.
terrorists.
Absolutely.
That's a narrative, right from Jammu Kashmir to Andhra Pradesh to Tamil Nadu. It has always been the narrative that
Correct.
a poor man can't just pick up a gun and kill people. You must have done something to it.
Correct.
I
Correct.
mean,
Correct. There was always this moral justification to their killing of people from the state. Right. If you're
absolutely,
killing a police
absolutely.
officer, he or she must have committed some atrocity on you. Right.
Yeah.
If you
Laden was a software engineer. Burhan Wani was a headmaster's son. I mean,
headmaster's son and oh my god, yes. And there were so many even mainstream Bollywood movies. Films like Fana come into my mind. Right. Just random understanding people with zero understanding of the ground realities romanticize these movements against the state because it
I,
becomes easy for them to get their,
I,
box office hits.
I'll tell you, this is not even funny. I think recently this Warib Naiku was killed. Naiku was a very, very essential operator
Uh-huh.
in Jammu Kashmir.
Mm-hmm.
He was backed by, of course, by ISI.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very daring operation. It was a cordon off operation by the Jammu and Kashmir Police, SOG, and the Special Forces.
Mm-hmm.
And after he was killed,
Mm-hmm.
I went on my Facebook and I challenged the print.
Mm.
Where is the resume of Naiku? Why isn't up on your website yet? And the
Yeah.
day after, they actually put it out. I'm
They
telling you what
did.
they wrote. Yeah. I'm actually telling you how much did he score in school, which colleges that he went to, what did his sister do, how was he as a child, how
Mm.
nice was he that he
Mm.
would read Quran, as many times a day as it is required,
Mm.
and he would still be nice to people. He would
Mm.
help people out. He would never fight. The kind of ice cream that he liked,
Oh my
and
goodness. Mm.
and that he would go out and play cricket with others. This was an entire op-ed on Naiku the day exactly after the encounter
And
happened.
not once did they mention what he was and how he was relevant to the terror network, right? They simply eulogized and glorified him.
So
I
this
mean,
is how it works. This is how narratives are created. See,
mhm.
human beings. See, at the end of the day, we are human beings. The emotion of another human being appeals to us. We like it when people are relatable.
Right.
Look, it doesn't matter to me. I mean, I can tell you as a human being, it wouldn't really matter to me if some guy, held two guns with his hand and shot down 10 terrorists.
Right.
It's just bravado. I've seen it in the films. But if somebody comes up and tells me that guy was as cool as you. I mean, he used to go into this pub and
Mm.
he would down 2 beers with his friends. I'm like, okay, now that's something that I can relate to. So
Which
this is how
also
narrative is created. Yeah.
which also brings me to another interesting point, and I understand what you're trying to link here is left-wing ideology is now somewhat, I mean, the lines are getting blurred between left-wing ideology and their idea of extremism vis-a-vis the conventional hardcore extremist terrorism that we see in Kashmir. Now they are trying to, in a way, subtly or maybe covert or overt, I don't know, it might be both ways. They are trying to
Yeah.
join forces, they are unifying themselves, and they're trying to project a unified version whereas India is the oppressor. From what started
Yeah.
as, okay, the upper caste are the oppressor for the LWE, right? Has
Yeah.
slowly and steadily morphed into India is the oppressor, the current government of the center is the oppressor, we are fighting the
Yes.
oppressors. Their ideologies are getting all blurred. There are no distinct lines. There was a time where there used to be a distinct line that, I mean, at least on record, wherein the LWE
Yeah.
did not cross a certain line, right? But now
Yeah. Yeah.
everything is fair game. Everything, any move is a fair game.
Yeah, yeah. So left-wing extremism has, shifted completely to IEDs. They've shifted to, large explosives.
Yes,
They do not want to engage in gun battles. They're mostly doing the job with explosives. I think they're taking the route that terrorists have been taking.
yes, they're becoming more terrorists than the terrorists
Correct.
themselves in a way.
Yeah, yeah. And they have been attacking civilians. They have been attacking, civil officers. They've been attacking the policemen, of course, that goes without saying. They've
Right.
been attacking villagers. They've been attacking women, children.
Villages, the people they're
uh,
fighting for.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, uh, as you know, the Gurupriya Setu that
Hmm.
was, constructed by the government a couple of years ago,
Hmm.
now connects what is called the Swabhiman Anchal of Malkangiri with the rest of the state.
Right.
So that area, around the Balimela Reservoir, used to be one of the biggest hotbeds of left-wing extremism in the entire country. Now that entire area has been connected,
Okay.
and just after I think it is probably this year only
Hmm.
when one of these extremist guys was actually lynched by the villagers, and the other guy with him barely managed to get out alive.
These villagers were frustrated and fed up of their antics anyway. They saw
They
through
actually
their game.
lynched. No, these guys had guns, so these guys said, no, nothing doing. You came here, you're dead now.
Hmm.
So villagers are now, forming their own movement, local movements against the left-wing
As a
extremists.
counter to the left wing
Yes,
ideology.
yes, because you look at it, the left-wing extremists in different states, like in Andhra Pradesh,
Hmm.
they have become an instrument for, the rich. They've become an instrument for the politicians. If
Okay.
the politician says, go and attack that guy, yeah, fine, they'll do it. If some industrialist pays them, they will do it.
Guns
So
for hire.
they've become, yeah, yeah, they become guns for hire. They've become exactly what they stood up
Stood up
against.
against.
Yeah, and that's why they have started angering the tribals. See, the tribals are connected to the land. Their souls are connected to the land. They're not concerned about urbanization. They're not concerned about fancy services.
Hmm.
They don't really care about who sits in Delhi. They
Hmm.
just care about their own right to be on their own land, on which
Hmm.
the predecessors were born.
Right. Which
And when
also.
the Naxals pawned that off, they stood up against the Naxals, and that's one of the reasons that the Naxals and the Maoists are disappearing.
Right. Because they are losing their mass support anyway, which was there in the
Actually,
80s.
they can't recruit anymore. See, if you can't
Hmm.
recruit, how will your movement go on?
How will the movement go on? Yes, and which also brings me to the question of their financing. This Naxal financing. Who finances them? Okay, there was a time when the center was led by UPA, which had the leftist parties as their coalition partners. So I understand that part. But when they are not in power, who funds
Yes.
these people? Foreign funds, internal funds. I wish you to shed some light on this in a general way.
Yeah. So the left, driven extremist movements have
Hmm.
traditionally been supported by China. They've always been supported by China,
Hmm.
and China has found different ways of supplying them with guns.
Hmm.
A lot of these Naxals today, in fact, a lot of terrorists today,
Hmm.
use the Chinese versions of AK-47s.
The Chinese have copied the AK-47 as well.
Oh, of course, they'll copy anything,
Hmm.
but that most weapons that the terrorists today use
Mm-hmm.
are manufactured in China.
In China.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and that also goes for the Naxal movement as well.
Hmm.
So yes, China has supported them with logistics.
Mhm.
And of course, the communists have a way of generating, resources. This is mostly done by what you call crowdfunding. See, nobody harps more about crowdfunding than the left does. There is a reason for that. So their funds, of course, come from villages. It comes from, of course, it also comes from capitalists. I mean, it comes from the
Yeah, guns
business
for hire.
community.
Hmm.
Yeah, so high, yeah, and that's the reason that they have taken to these, big guys. That you give us money, we keep you safe. They also function as armed guards.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah. It makes sense in a weird way. Yes. They are
Yes.
the guns for hire. So the capitalists keep them well fed so that they don't come back and bite them in the long run.
Yeah, yeah. So they also are used as a militia against the local people. So if you don't pay the wages well, I mean the
Hmm.
local people will revolt.
Reward. So
Probably reduce your establishment to ashes. But if you have the local Naxal group on hire, these people will make sure that the local villagers don't
which
come into your
which makes
establishment.
it even more complicated for our internal security forces to be able to wipe off this particular aspect of homegrown terror in any way. See, they're
Absolutely.
supported by the very people they stood up against, the capitalists, the Adanis and the Ambanis of the world. I don't say Adani is, but Adani becomes the prime, it becomes a metaphor of sorts, right? Right.
Yes.
So my again, that is when my doubt lies. Ki if these people are supported by the very persons, the very movement was founded that okay, we have to protest against the rich capitalists, right? And now they
Right.
have become nothing but guns for, at least in some places. I have heard of reports that some power plant people who run power plants in interior parts of India and Odisha,
Yes.
maybe
Yes.
they keep these people at at their beck and call so that anything happens, they will hire them to get the dirty job done. Right. So when these kind of complications creep in, and I'll come to that again in a minute or so, it becomes very difficult for the security forces to be able to wipe them off completely from the map of India. Right.
See, in early 2000s,
Hmm.
Odisha, there were 20, I think 23 districts in Odisha were affected by left-wing extremism.
23.
Out of 30, out of 30,
So only seven were free.
all seven were in the coastal belt.
Hmm. And
So
now
today,
where does it stand today?
just two.
Fantabulous. Hmm. Anyways, one more aspect, and just a couple of lines. Uh, Given the recent SSR, Disha Salyan, the drugs and all, I have read some
Yes,
reports that drugs have also become an important revenue generator for the Naxal people in the middle belts of India.
yes,
And Odisha is one of them. Odisha, I think, in some
yes,
places around
yes.
Koraput, they have large farms of ganja and weed and whatnot. And by
Yeah,
selling them, they're able to maintain some amount of their revenue income is getting generated by the sale of these weeds. Is it true, or is it just a
yes.
report in thin
So
air?
cannabis, since it's illegal,
Hmm.
and of course it is easier to grow in the belts that they live in, and
Right.
it has become one of the prime sources of income.
Okay.
It is actually these left-wing extremists that run this entire cartel
Right.
across the country. They rake in, I would go as far as saying billions to fund their entire movement just from the cannabis trade across the country.
Okay.
They don't just, although it is believed that cannabis forms a major part of their income, they
Right.
also run, other drugs. They, I'm talking about serious psychotropic drugs
Okay.
on behest of bigger criminal syndicates, because
So
they have the logistics. They have the network.
right.
They have in the past done something similar in Northeast,
Right.
where they've reached out to their friends on other side of the border and helped them traffic drugs, major drugs.
But again, I mean, I wish to deliberate on this a bit further. As in, they have become cartels, like drug cartels, in the name of
Yes,
either.
yes.
Oh,
They organize syndicates. They organize crime syndicates.
the
And I'm
parallel.
just telling you about the major crimes. There are also petty crimes that they do. They are into the local abduction socket as well.
The
I mean,
kidnapping
that's
mafia.
some easy money to, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's some easy money to make. I mean, kidnap a builder's son, he gives you 2 crores and you return it.
My
So they're also
God.
into the kidnapping circuit, they are into the extortion circuit. I mean, like in Mumbai back in the 90s, you couldn't build even like a small travel agency without paying money to somebody who was connected in some way to Dowd's network. And so similarly, it was the case in the Northeast and as well as in Odisha and Andhra Pradesh,
Right.
that you had to pay some chanda, some hafta
Hafta.
to these people.
Hafta was
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So
So you had to, because if you don't do, the other day somebody's head will be hanging on your doors.
right, mafia style, like mafia only,
Absolutely.
glorified mafia, right?
True.
Right. So now we move to the next phase of our discussion. This phase will require some detailed analysis from your end as to how this movement was countered. When I say how this movement was countered in terms of ideology, in the level of propaganda spread by them, how it was countered there, as well as in by the use of Central Armed Police Forces (CAPF), and I'm talking like military style operations. Because see, our India faces threats not only from external enemies but internal enemies as well. And in some cases, and in more cases, maybe internal enemies are stronger than our external enemies because
Okay.
they are rotting us from within. Right. So in this aspect, what I wish to know from you is how it was countered. When I say this, see, back in the 80s or in the 70s, 80s, our internal security establishment was not as segmented and organized as it is today. Right.
True.
And it took us by surprise. I'm pretty sure the initial phase took us by surprise because no one in India, in the Indian security apparatus, was able to understand the extent of their reach. They were more focused on let's defeat Pakistan, let's defeat China, and this, that. But there was a lack of focus from as far as the internal security was concerned. And suddenly these guys expanded like anything. Right. I wish you to deliberate on from that point in time to a point today where I believe, I might be wrong, I believe that our internal security and our internal security apparatus has an upper edge on them, at least in the current scenario. Right?
Yes. Now it does.
It does, right? So how did it start? So again, over to you.
So of course it started with CRPF.
Okay.
This is the oldest war horse that India has when it comes to internal security.
Right.
Uh, it was actually the crown of India's internal security, but it was not CRPF that is initially credited with the success. It was the local police. Down in the 90s and the early 2000s, we had the emergence of a few more agencies. So India has 7 CPMFs, there's a Central Paramilitary Force.
Okay.
And it starts with the Central Reserve Police Force. You have the Border Security Force. You have the Assam Rifles. Assam Rifles are very potent.
Right.
You have the Central Industrial Security Force. You have the
Right.
ITBP. You have the Seema Suraksha Bal, and you have the National Security Guard.
Right.
Although we see some of them in different roles, they were all created to secure the country internally. We mostly see CRPF because they are the biggest in number.
Right.
That's the reason. And by the way, the combined number of these 7 CPMFs is over 1 million.
Wow.
Makes it the biggest, CPMF contingent in the world.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, 10 lakh. Yes. So again,
nobody has more.
So see, again, see for example, CRPF started off. I mean, at least in the initial phase, it was CRPF which took precedence, right? Then there was a need for CISF, which came into being because industrial force security was the need of the hour, given that they were located in far-off places and more susceptible to Naxalist violence, right? My question is NSG, and that is what is surprising to me. Even NSG has the task of internal security, like security as far as our Naxal movement is concerned against the movement. Okay, that becomes news.
Yes.
Okay.
So internal security. So when we talk about internal security, we also talk about problems like riots. We're talking about communal events. We're talking about sudden uprising. We're talking about hijackings. We're talking about hostage situations.
Yes.
Various kinds of situations that can happen. So these are the CPMFs. Remember, these are the Central Paramilitary Force. Then the states have their own forces, which I will come to, which is even more interesting. See, when these forces were created, initially in India, law and order, state security, this is a state subject. So which is why we are in so much trouble today. because the center and the states won't see eye to eye on the wake of federalism, that we
Okay.
are a federal nation
Hmm.
and the center cannot have that kind of access to the state's law and order machinery. So that's
Hmm.
why states operate on a different parallel plane. The center operates on a different parallel plane. There
Hmm.
have been many recent efforts to combine both of them, converge both of
Hmm.
them somewhere. There were some very, very ambitious proposals. Uh, I think none of them have worked so far, but we had some partial degree of success with some reforms. So the first after 1999, remember 1999 was of course a lapse. 1999 wasn't just smartness by Pakistan; it was some
Labs.
lapse in
Hmm.
India's
Hmm. The Kandahar one,
intelligence
right? The
capacity.
Kandahar hijack, right?
Yeah,
There were
no, I'm
some.
talking about Kargil. I'm talking about Kargil incursion.
Oh, sorry, 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 sorry.
Kargil. I'm sorry,
Kargil,
Kargil.
yes.
Kargil, yeah. So Kargil was the lapse in intelligence as well. So after Kargil, some steps were taken. A National Security Council was created. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So this would be chaired by the Prime Minister himself.
All right.
And then we had a strategic policy group. This was the think tank for
Hmm.
national security. Then we had the National Security Advisory Board.
Hmm.
This was the central body for making those policies and
Okay.
formulating those policies.
Okay.
And the NSAB was comprised of the Ministry of Defense, the heads of intelligence, and they also had a National Security Council Secretariat that was like a part of NSAB to
Okay.
help them.
Okay. Okay.
And then we also had what you have heard very often, the National Security Advisor, which is
Yes.
Mr. Ajit Dovala. So
Yes.
these are very late additions to the intelligence apparatus.
Mm-hmm.
Apart from that, you have your Joint Intelligence Committee, you have the Cabinet Committee on Security. These are smaller committees that were created. Then you have the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is a nodal agency for different
Mm-hmm.
intelligence agencies like
Okay.
IB, law, like all of them can work
So,
together. So this
okay.
also, I'll just detail a bit further
Yeah,
that
sure.
why it is very important for us to understand that how all of these agencies operate. So we
Yes.
have MAX and we have SMAX. So MAX are multi-agency centers. Multi-agency centers is where these top agencies come together.
Mm-hmm.
Like it is the club of the big boys.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're talking about military intelligence, IB, RAW.
Hmm.
Then there is a subsidiary multi-agency center. This is like the small boys club. I mean,
Right.
this is where the younger
Sibling.
siblings of these agencies come together and share
Yes.
intelligence. So there is, you have the max, you have the smax. This is how intelligence flows.
Okay.
All right,
When
this
you
is how
talk
it
of
is analyzed.
Smacks, when we talk of Smacks, Max is the sibling, the younger brother of the two, right? But my question
Yes.
is, how does the intelligence flow from the state level, right? From the booth level, from the police booth level, way up to the Smacks, and maybe probably if required, then up to the max level. How does
Yeah,
it
yeah.
flow?
So all states, all state police have their
Hmm.
own intelligence departments.
Okay.
All right. So the intelligence from there is of course passed on to the Defense Intelligence Agency,
Okay.
where it also when now you have after the 2611 the NIA
Hmm.
was created. So now you have NIA that is there. Sorry, I think NIA predates 2611. So NIA is around now. You have NIA that takes care of all kinds of national security. The national security is comprised of inputs from this MAX and SMAX.
Okay. Okay.
NIA is a central agency.
Okay. 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 So even Max are, I mean, they report to NIA in a way. So NIA becomes the nodal
Yes.
center for everything related to security, be it internal or
Yeah,
external.
yeah. See, for external, you have raw. The representative is raw. For internal, the major representative is the Intelligence Bureau.
Yeah,
So the
but
input from both is taken.
Max also includes RNAW, RAW, right? So in a
Yeah,
way,
yeah, yeah.
RAW reports to NIA or remains
Yes.
as independent as it is.
No, see, there is no talk about, see, raw reports to the Prime Minister, right?
Okay.
So
Okay.
raw has nothing to be afraid of. This is just, two senior compatriots sitting together and saying, okay, I know this, you know this. Now
Okay.
what
Okay.
happens? This is
Okay.
where the
Okay.
NIA steps in, takes care of the intelligence,
Hmm.
and then it creates analysis that can go to the National Security Advisor,
Hmm.
who can take it with the NSAB, who can, pass it on to the Prime Minister and say, Prime Minister, sir, this is the problem internally, this is the problem externally.
Externally. Then the Prime Minister takes a call how to solve it. Of course. Of course.
Yes. So we
Okay.
so we now also have the NAT grid, that is the National Intelligence Grid.
Okay.
So So there were two huge reforms that happened after 26/11.
Okay.
One is the NCTC, the National Counter-Terrorism Center, and
Okay.
then you have National Counter-Terrorism Council, sorry, and then you have the NatGrid. So NCTC was a very, very sweeping reform. It led to the foundation of an agency that was that was almost as powerful as RAW, even more powerful than the IB when it came to counterterrorism. And it had the ambition that it could literally walk into any state, conduct any kind of operation, not having to give the bullet count, not having to do a kill count, and not having to answer a judiciary.
Extrajudicial in that
This
sense,
was
right?
almost. It was almost like it was a constitutional body in itself. Of course, NCTC at that point was opposed by all the non-Congress states. In fact, Narendra Modi ji was one of the chief ministers who stood up and said, "No, we will not allow this to function."
But it
So of
was
course,
it was done anyway.
yeah. Eventually, it was done, but it was stripped of its powers. It was made to report to IB.
Ah. So what
It was made to report to IB. So its powers are stripped off, completely stripped off, and even today, it is still in a very, very nascent state. I don't think it will ever pick up.
But
As
then
long
what's
as
the point? Should it not be stripped off completely, like let it go?
See, I mean, this is how forces like these operate across the world.
Okay.
You can't take permission from some
No.
home secretary in some state about what to do about a terrorist.
Yeah,
He's
I
not
get that. I
qualified.
get that. My doubt is if they have to report to intelligence bureaus, right?
Yeah.
Does it make any sense for them to exist as a body? Anyways, the intelligence bureau will somewhere or the other
It
collect.
actually doesn't. It actually doesn't. I'm very surprised why the NCTC has not been completely dismantled yet.
Exactly my point. That is exactly my point.
You
It
know,
should have been.
it's a sorry state of affairs for NCTC. It has a brilliant charter. It has some brilliant set of objectives to achieve. I think given the right motivation, NCTC could have flipped around the game. Although India's national security is in better hands now, we've seen a great cut down in in the reduction of these threats. But I think having something like NCTC, the key point was to prevent these events from happening at all, to nip them in the bud. And so after NCTC, the NatGrid was created. NatGrid was created. It was you remember Cerebro, right? From the X-Men.
Yeah.
Something that Charles Xavier would put on, and he could see literally anything.
Yes.
So NatGrid is that magic hat. It has the database of every single thing in the country, and recently it has been integrated with the CCTNS that belongs to the police services.
Okay.
So they literally have data on every single individual in the country, which is essential if you want to track down criminal activity, if you want to pick up the breadcrumbs.
Yes.
And connect them to bigger cases. So NatGrid is, I wouldn't call NatGrid a success. Of course, it's very moderately successful. Because a lot of people have taken up, the data privacy activists have taken it up against NatGrid, just like they have taken it up against Aadhaar. So I don't know how they're equating both of it, but they seem to be very successful because
even I am at odds with the understanding here. I mean, I don't know where to draw the line between privacy and national security. It's a debate.
I have no idea.
Yeah,
I have no idea.
No idea.
I mean, at some point you will have to, draw a line on the sand,
and that sand can be blurred any day. Somebody can simply wipe it off. That is the problem.
Yes. So when it comes to national security, these have to be lines on the sand. You cannot have absolute privacy.
Absolute privilege. I get that. Yes. So coming back to this security apparatus.
Yes.
I understand that there were some elite commando operation groups created at the state level as well to counter the Naxal menace.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I'll tell you.
Yes.
You'll be very surprised to know who else has it.
Who?
So you've heard about Odisha police. You've heard about what they do. And you've heard about SOG, the Special Operations Group.
Yes.
So Jammu Kashmir Police has a special operations group, which is of course the oldest, and that is where it was needed first.
Right.
So you have the Greyhounds that operate in Andhra Pradesh now.
Okay.
You have the counter insurgency force in West Bengal.
They have one. Where it all started, right? It's ironical in a way. Yes.
Yes. And very interesting, you have after 2611, you had the Force One in Mumbai Police.
In Mumbai Police, yes, that is something I'm aware of. Yes,
Eh,
almost it
eh,
looks like a carbon copy of the NSG system. I mean, structure-wise.
Yes, yes. So you also have two more. You have a SWAT in the country, which is with the Punjab Police.
Yes, and they're very capable, is what I've heard. They are ex-military,
Yes,
comprised of
yes,
ex-military.
all of them,
Yes,
almost.
almost all of them.
And another glorious entrant into this elite club is Kerala.
Kerala
So
also has
Kerala
one.
has, yeah, so
Okay.
Kerala Police has what are called the Thunderbolts.
Okay. Okay. Karnataka also
Yes,
has Garud Force, right? Garuds.
no, Garuds are in fact no, it's not the Garuds. Garuds are the special forces equivalent of the Air Force.
Yeah, but they also have a Garud in Karnataka level, I suppose. I do think so. There is one
I
Garud
mean,
with the IAF.
yeah. So see, there are some special units that are raised amongst, you know, police companies to, take care of
These,
special. But I think it's more of a special team,
right. But
of
these
a
special
special group.
forces, state level, they report to the state machinery, right? They don't report to the central
Absolutely,
machinery.
absolutely. Yeah. So just recently, I think the newest entrant into the club is Uttar Pradesh. So you have the UPSSF,
I
the
just
Uttar
heard of
Pradesh
that.
Special Security Forces.
Special security forces. Yes,
This,
yes, yes.
this is being raised on the recommendation of the High Court,
Okay.
and it'll be very interesting. It'll be very interesting because SSF is a combination of CISF.
Mm-hmm.
It is a CISF in a way CRPF
Mm-hmm.
and the Mumbai Police's Force One model.
So it's a hybrid model.
Yes, it's a hybrid model because they're going to take care of industrial units. They're going to take care of government buildings.
Mhm.
They're going to take care of high value assets like the VIPs,
Mhm.
and they are also going to engage in taking down criminal syndicates because UP is infamous, of course.
Yes. Oh, yes.
So
Yes.
it'll be very interesting to see how UPSSF is
And how
raised,
successful they are.
and yeah,
Mm.
the special mention here for Odisha Police.
Yes.
I mean,
Please. I mean, yeah, by all
eh,
means, please.
by the way. So Odisha Police, the SOG
Mhm.
is not alone. There are some smaller units that in a way support the
Okay.
SOG group.
Okay.
And these units are formed of former Odisha police officers and SOG veterans,
Okay.
or just recruits from the SOG. So
Okay.
one is the recent one, the OSAF. It's a Odisha
What is
Swift
this?
Action Force. This is
Okay.
modeled after the Rapid Action Force.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
It's called OSAF. OSAF is mostly meant for countering or neutralizing events inside cities. That's what
Okay.
OSAF is for.
More
OSAF
urban, I
is,
suppose.
yeah. Right now, it operates under the Commissionerate Police,
Oh,
Bhubaneswar Commissionerate Police.
okay.
Yeah, it's a most of a twin city force. It's a smaller force. It is only brought out to secure VIPs or secure very critical events.
Right. Right.
So
But
apart from OSAF, you have the DVF. You have the DVF. So DVF is a district voluntary force. DVF is formed of in a way the officers who quit SOG after the commissioning. So these officers then joined the DVF. DVF is not an active military unit as such. It
okay.
is more of a search and nab unit.
Okay.
Is uh, I think it is more civil in nature than military.
When you say
So that's
civil,
DVF.
I want to understand what is the area of operations. I mean, what is the mandate?
So they operate in the Naxal hotbed, but
Okay.
their idea is to collect intelligence,
Acha.
to train local villagers,
Mm-hmm.
understand local issues,
Hmm.
and analyze Naxal movement patterns,
Hmm.
and ensure that the police has the right kind of roadmap and right kind of threat assessment before they can conduct an operation.
Okay, okay. My doubt is, given so many elite units at the state level, and we also have the intelligence gathering units at the state and center level, it becomes a very difficult job to coordinate each and every action, right? It becomes very
Yeah.
difficult.
So in fact, under SOG, you
Mhm.
also have the STU. It's called the Special Tactical Unit. So Special Tactical Unit is the basically the Special Forces division
Odisha.
inside Odisha Police. Yeah.
Okay.
So it is formed of the best from the SOG.
Okay.
And these are the guys who conduct these kind of very, very daring operations,
Okay.
very
Okay.
daring operations. And they have, you know, most of these high profile, you know, Naxal neutralization operations that you heard about
Mm-hmm.
have come from this division,
STU. Okay. Okay.
ST.
And there was some I forget the name. There was also some kind of a counter move operation started by the Chhattisgarh police, wherein they were arming local tribesmen, the local
Salva
villagers again.
Jodum.
Salva Judum.
It's called
Yes,
Salva Jodum.
yes. That is still in operation. I think the courts have struck it down, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah. So the problem is that it became the base for a lot of excesses, both
Okay.
by the Naxals and by the police forces and
Okay.
by the CRP as well. So the
Okay.
problem is when you create extra constitutional units, you
Huh,
create
there.
these groups that have no accountability, you will
Ha.
obviously end up in trouble. And
Yes.
we have to learn from how other countries have done it. See,
Right.
it's not that all of them have went beyond the book.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
maybe bent the law a little bit, but they have
Okay.
stayed in the book and they've still done it. A lot of countries have had very
Salva
successful
Judum was
models.
absolutely extra. I mean, judicial, so to speak, right? It was just
Completely.
like, I mean, the wild, wild west. Everyone has a gun and everyone shoots the other. Uh,
Yes.
right.
No, I can understand that it was probably a stopgap arrangement,
Mm-hmm.
to hold down the fort till the big
Mm-hmm.
boys come in with the
Mm-hmm.
marching tanks and whatnot. But I think that's not a solution, and I would never encourage anybody to, get into that
Yes.
the mindset of thinking. And
Yes.
this is where Odisha police has actually excelled, because Odisha police is the one state that
Mm-hmm.
has moved out of the infamous five.
Huh. I mean, yeah, from
Rest
23
are
to
all
2.
there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, they must
So
have done something
rest,
right.
rest, all of the states are still there.
True.
And in fact, the Odisha cadre of both Maoists and Naxalites, they are considered the low rung guys in the entire ecosystem of the left.
Oh, okay.
They're so worthless even in their own ecosystem. Hey, it's almost like a punishment posting if you
Yeah.
have to go and operate in Odisha and Andhra
Jana.
Pradesh border.
Right.
There was a time when the most notorious used to come around, and
And used
now
to
it
be a
has
badge of
become
honor
a
for them.
ragtag.
Ki we are working in the forests and in the difficult areas. Now it has become like a punishment posting, like you go there, jaake sado wahan pe dal. Right.
like you didn't like function well in funding, you
Huh.
didn't collect enough, now you go
Go now you go. That is your punishment. Jao, go
and
get
you die of
malaria.
shame,
Yeah,
not of
and
police brutality.
if not shame, then malaria for sure. Right. Right. Now, okay, now we get some idea about how India is countering our left-wing extremism movements, which has sprung up at one point in time. They were, like you said, 200 districts were there. From there, it has come down to a figure wherein I believe that we are in a position of advantage over these Naxalist wings,
Totally,
right?
totally. A very distinct advantage.
Very distinct
And
advantage.
the way that these forces have declined,
Hmm.
and the way that the development has happened. Remember, the core issue was that the government was not reaching out to these people who were in
Yes,
dire need of resources.
yes,
Now that
yes.
has started. Eventually, I think there are very few areas of this country today
Hmm.
that are in a way waterlogged and away from the mainstream civilization.
Untouched
I
and
think
all.
very, yeah.
Hmm.
So most of these areas have now been touched by development. The wheels
Hmm.
of progress have rolled in. You have
Hmm.
infrastructure, you have social welfare programs, you have poverty alleviation programs, you have the
Yes.
public distribution reaching out. You have very conscious. Actually, you have very conscious social activism also,
Right.
trying to protect these indigenous people also,
Right.
not just
Right.
from the Naxals but also from the clutches of of course, the corporates. So in a
Right.
way,
Right.
yes,
Right.
I'm also happy that there is a positive activism in favor of them to protect their way of life.
Okay.
Governments have also become very sensitive
Right.
that if you go on building recklessly on their land, they
Hmm.
will take up a gun. It doesn't matter for whom.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, but the thing is, like we discussed earlier, it is Naxalism as a ideology in the core areas where it matters is losing steam anyway, because people are now aware that these people are nothing but exploiters under the garb of communism. They are looting both ways. They're looting the capitalists and they're looting the villagers also. So they are losing their
Absolutely.
ground, right? But
True.
on the same topic, if I can go further, and this would be our last last topic of discussion before we wind up for the day, is
Okay.
what is the future? We now know the past. You have established it very well. We now know how and where our security, internal security apparatus, where it stands in terms of be it intelligence sourcing, how it reports, the reporting hierarchy, or the forces, the ones who do the talking with the guns. Right. What I want to understand now is the future. Number one, given the connected world today that we live in. Earlier, it was a
Yes.
very fragmented world. The world was a
Hmm.
large place, long place. I mean, there were people who didn't
Yes.
know the people from the other village. They were at odds. They never knew that there was a village there. Now, thanks to the internet and the level of internet penetration, even though it is low in India today, but it is still better than what it used to be, right? So everyone has a mobile. Everyone has some level of connectivity to the world outside. So my question is, do you think this ideological drive, this movement will sustain in the long term in the core areas where it matters? Number one. Number two is in the urban areas where it becomes very fashionable, and like I said, it is romanticized, this fight against the government, and we'll stand up against this and we'll stand up against that. They are completely living in a parallel world of their own where they're disconnected from reality. For them, it becomes a fashionable item. It becomes a, it's a photographable
Yes.
moment for them to post it in social media, which is ironical in itself. Social media, all the Facebook and Googles of the world are the biggest capitalists. They use the same
Yes.
medium. They enforce the same capitalist ideology to propagate their message. So there is a
True.
disconnect. There is a huge gap between the man on the ground in the village trying to spread the Naxal ideology, like the Naxal sympathizer, or so to speak, versus the urban, show off, if I can say so, show off, trying to be more Naxal than the Naxal themselves. So where is the? I mean, I want to know, given this disconnect, where do you see the future of this movement?
Uh, See, all movements over the years have had a evolution,
Okay.
right? See, a lot of movements don't last at
Okay.
all.
Okay.
So the ones that last are successful because they're able to, transcend different decades.
Okay.
They're able to, go beyond the political scenarios. They're able to adapt.
Okay.
Look
Okay.
at the Nazi Party. The Nazi Party still exists. I mean, even if in smaller pockets, it still exists.
Hmm.
Who would have thought, right?
Who would have thought?
It
Yes.
might be it might not be relevant anymore, but it still
Hmm.
exists. The
Hmm.
Communist Party of China, after doing all of this, I mean, the communism in a way is a dominant force in Eastern Europe. You still
Yes.
have it in China and have it in Russia. So I'm saying
Yes.
a lot of these movements have undergone some changes, like the economic policies in China have become very capitalist, very
Yes.
progressive, very globalist also.
Hmm.
In Russia, in terms of national security, of course, it was always like a hawk, and it has become very trade friendly. Russia has
Hmm.
become very trade friendly, by the way.
Hmm.
So, which of course doesn't go well with the
The
basic
core
tenets of
ideology.
communism.
Hmm.
I'm saying just because they've adapted, they have managed to stay relevant in some or different way.
Hmm.
And this is what is happening with the left wing movement in India as well. They were pushed out of the forests. So
Hmm.
now they are creeping into the cities because that's the only refuge that they have, or they perish. So what do they have to do? They don't have to make a lot of noise right now. If they do,
Hmm.
people will know that, okay, these are the lot that have come from the jungle. They have
Hmm.
just kept their guns outside the house. They've just come in. We know who these people are. So what they've done is they have shunned the guns
Hmm.
permanently. The good lot of them. They
Hmm. Hmm.
have, come into our societies. They have come into the academia that we attend. They've come into think tanks where we work. They've
Yes.
come into the governments. They've come into political parties,
Unions.
unions, in fact, and they have started engineering smaller entities. They've started engineering smaller uprisings. So smaller uprisings, when you look at it on a bigger picture,
Hmm.
it will lead to a massive anarchy in the future. Look at the United States.
Yes.
Earlier it had the trade union movement.
Hmm.
Of course, it had the Black Lives Movement during Obama's time as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
It had these anarchist movements against right wing
Hmm.
politics. It
Hmm.
had this anti-Nazi movements as well. So there were
Antifa.
various movements. Yeah, Antifa. So there were various smaller movements.
Hmm.
When they had a big trigger in form of the death of George Floyd, they
Yes.
just joined hands. So
Yes.
BLM, Antifa, a lot of smaller forces joined hands, and it became a massive picture of anarchy. So these were all relevant forces operating on US soil for a long time. So the
Imagine
same is in
US of
India.
all places, the doyen of capitalism. They are now falling prey to communism in their own way. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
socialism. The Democratic Party has been hijacked by the progressives, basically the Democratic Socialists. You
Yes.
have the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Cortez. Yes.
Yeah, you have the
The
Girl Squad
refugee.
of hers. Then you have, of course, the great Bernie Sanders.
Yes.
So,
The
and the
ultimate
same
socialist of them all, Bernie Sanders.
Bernie Sanders. But I respect Bernie Sanders because of his civil,
But at
activism
least, I mean,
ways.
got to give him respect, even if you don't agree to what he says it openly. There is no hiding in
No,
what he does.
he has conviction. See,
Yes, he has,
Bernie
he is
Sanders was a
convinced
man.
internally. Hmm.
So Bernie Sanders was a man, I mean, who stood up against the Jim Crow policies. He is one of
Hmm.
the only surviving leaders from the times of Dr. King.
Yes.
He was one
Yes.
of those guys who stood up for the African Americans on the streets of
Yes,
United
he did.
States, got beaten up, got dragged on the road by policemen, being a white guy. So I respect him for that. But having said that, his ideology is out there. They
Out
have
there.
hijacked the Democratic Party. The
Hmm.
moderates are getting pushed, and
Hmm.
soon the era of the Joe Bidens and the Kamala Harrises will be over permanently
Hey,
in the next
Kamala
six to
Harris is
seven
a
years.
sham anyway. She stands nowhere. She has no conviction. She she
Look,
she
look,
she's just trying to get power. She has absolutely zero
no,
conviction
no.
about the Democratic
She
Party
is the
itself.
mother of identity politics inside the Democratic
Yes.
Party.
Today
She's
she
fighting on
becomes
the plank that she is a woman,
ha
that she is African American, that she
ha
has an Indian descent, that
Chennai
she is
ha
a liberal,
ha
and like she is a former, attorney.
ha and
Okay,
that
there's so many identities that she has assumed.
today she is black, tomorrow she becomes Indian, the other day she becomes Hispanic, and then the other day she becomes Democratic. Everything goes like उसका तो कुछ
Whatever.
nothing है, सब चलता है, right?
This is why I think this intersectionalist politics
हाँ,
in the electoral system. See, I do have a lot of respect for intersectional politics, but
okay.
when you do it as a politics of ideas, when it is a social movement, when it
Hmm.
comes to electoral politics, intersectional politics is a joke.
Is a joke. Yes, it is.
It's an absolute joke
Hmm.
because there are candidates in our country who
Hmm.
say that I will do this for women, that for women, and they only have women supporters. Then there are people who say we'll do this for Hindus, we'll do this for Hindus. They only have Hindus on their side. They go out and they fight elections and they win. Remember, these guys have promised just one thing, but as your member of parliament or as a member of legislative assembly,
Hmm.
they will have to do a lot more,
Yes. Yeah.
which means
Yeah.
you ideally shouldn't have voted these people in.
Yeah, and also my gripe with this urban naxals is the term which Vivek Abhinav coined, is that
Yeah.
they don't. I personally feel they don't have the conviction to push it. People
No, no, no,
like
no, no. So you're looking at it the wrong way. I think Vivek, in a way, is also looking at it the wrong way. Look,
okay,
this is the transformation of this movement. This is the evolution of this movement. What you're seeing is a blip.
okay,
What you're seeing is a blip. It will peak in the next 15 to 20 years when these people permanently capture the establishment in different countries. So look, left is more prolific across nations than the right. The left has
yes,
an international coalition.
yes,
It is like the Amazon of, so I mean, political movement.
yes. There
It
you will
is
find
invisible in
leftists
everything,
everywhere. Hmm.
everywhere. But there is no united coalition of right-wing parties. I think this is for the first time where you have a Donald Trump, where you have a Boris Johnson, where you have a Bolsonaro, where you
Hmm.
have a Putin. This is mostly right-leaning leaders for the very first time are dominating world politics,
Okay, okay,
and
okay.
they are in fact part of various groups.
So
They are
you,
together.
so what you're saying is the left people, I mean the people who shout leftist ideology and their principles on media today are just a minor blip. They are nowhere, they'll
Yeah,
come and go. The ideology in itself is having a paradigm shift from the forests
yes,
to the urban areas.
urban areas. They no longer want to hold guns. Why do you have to hold a gun when you can legally walk up to a courtroom and burn it down? and say that you're doing it because some policeman in some city shot
Hmm.
some person.
Shot some person. So let's burn it down. Arson and all. Yeah, I mean, yeah. But I only hope that there are some countermeasures in place and will. I have a fundamental issue with the idea of the left. My thing is, if there's genuine oppression, anyway, the people will rise. The leftists are what they are doing, especially in the urban centers. They have not faced any persecution of the sort that at least the people in the past have, right? Especially this newbie lefties, right?
See, I'll tell you, unlike in United States, in India, you
Hmm.
first get to milk the government of the benefits of being of the oppressed class. Before getting oppressed, you enjoy
Before
the
it,
benefits of being oppressed.
yeah, that is exactly my point.
Everyone, almost everyone.
They enjoy all the benefits and then they cry wolf. And the biggest irony of it all is they do it on a platform which is absolutely capitalist. All the social media websites, none of these exist in,
See, see,
for
I mean, it's quite funny. It's quite funny that these people talk about the Facebook being right leaning. See, Facebook is pro business. It
yes, it
only
is.
sticks to governments
Yes.
across the world. It
All they
doesn't
care
ally with
about
the
is generating
opposition.
revenue. Today, Nike
Yeah,
ads are all about Black Lives Matter. Tomorrow, white lives start mattering. Then they again will shift to white lives matter. All of them.
absolutely. See, you look at Twitter. Twitter is smart. Look, if Facebook has hijacked the space on the right, the pro-government space,
Huh.
what will Twitter do? Twitter is a direct competitor. So
Correct.
it goes and says that I'll stick to the opposition.
Huh. Correct. Correct. Correct.
So
Yeah.
that's why Twitter has been banning right-wing people,
And Facebook is
both in
also
United
smart.
States and then
Facebook is smart. Facebook as a platform might be right willing, but Instagram is heavily left willing, which again reports to Facebook. A bit.
because Instagram is mostly a place for millennials and the Gen
Millennials.
Z
It's
and the
Gen
Gen
Z.
Z and
Yeah.
the Gen
Yeah.
Z and millennials will always be moderates, more liberals, more leaning towards the democratic and the centrist and the globalist parties
Yes.
across the world. That's why it's very careful modulation of their
Yes,
policies.
but they are liberals and lefties till it comes to the stomachs. When they go out and have to earn in the world, that is when the capitalist funda hits them and hits them very hard. And they are not in a place to, between the high, kya bolte hain usko, thorn and the fire wala cheez. They are stuck in the middle
Everybody
of
is a
both.
fascist.
Uh,
Everybody is a fascist till the real fascist walks in. And the real fascist is mostly the guy on the left.
yeah, so theek hai. Anyways, my hope is a genuine movement is fine. A genuine movement having
I
its
agree.
roots steeped in ideology, which is pro farmers, pro peasants, is fine. The
Yeah.
hypocrisy is where I get bothered. You take all the
Yeah.
benefits, you use capitalist mediums, and then you cry wolf ki nahi, nahi, this government is here. And to be honest, like you had said in the last episode, the BJP government today at the center is more socialist than any other government in the recent memory.
Absolutely. It is.
What
It
they've
is.
done today, I mean, today only the farmers bill was passed. On a preliminary level, it gives more power to the farmers, right? So they are more socialist and have more socialist leanings than any other UPA government or any other government in the past 15, 20 years. Right. But
Yeah.
still, these
I
people
had a
is
conversation. Yeah. I had a funny conversation with my father, who, of course, still remains a member of the grand old party.
a grand old
So he
party.
told me, yeah. He said that these three bills are trash. They shouldn't be doing
Hmm,
this. I
hmm,
mean, a
hmm.
lot of people will be affected. I said, a legislation that removes dalals from the equation.
Hmm.
I'm not surprised. The biggest dalal sung in the country
Hmm.
is affected by it.
Is affected by it. True.
It
Yeah,
is Indian
absolutely.
National Congress. It is the biggest dalal sung in the country.
They
Of course,
are.
it will be affected. And APMCs, I'll tell you why APMCs have been a joke. See, of course, Odisha is a star performer when it comes to public distribution system
Hmm, hmm, hmm,
and the public procurement of food grains.
hmm.
The APMCs are generally, almost controlled by the local sarpanch, and they controlled heavily by the local BJD politicians. All APMCs. So in Punjab, the APMCs have a fair division, half to Akalis, half for Congress.
हाँ, सब मिल बांट के
So
खाओ वाला.
APMCs are generally controlled heavily by the local politicians.
Local politics,
APMCs
satraps.
it's not like a very nice, very legitimate, reasonable group
Hmm.
of government officials who do
Yeah, yeah. That is my point. I mean, this government, if anything, should not be blamed for being capitalist. They're anything but capitalist. At least
that.
this particular phase. Right.
I
Maybe
mean,
I don't know.
नरेंद्र मोदी goes around saying कि मैं चाय बेचता था, ठीक है, मेरी माँ छोटे से घर में रहती है,
हाँ.
So how do you, you know, think that this guy can ever dare to
Yeah, I
portray
mean,
himself
yeah,
as capitalist? He
and the
can't.
proof of the pudding is always in the eating. All of his policies, whatever he has introduced, they are
Yeah,
socialist in nature. The
absolutely
right wing
socialist.
agenda is one thing, but pure economics point of view, if I say so, it is all socialist. Be it the direct distribution to their accounts, be it this now recently this farmers, yeah,
Yeah.
anything and everything he does is keeping the larger interest of the proletariat, so to speak, in mind. But
Ah,
ठीक
yeah,
है,
so that
we
will
have
be
to
the case
protest.
because that's how India is. Look,
Uh,
there are some ways that the country has been modeled. The way the
hmm,
country has been modeled since independence, and I think a few more generations down the line, 3 to 4 generations down the line, I
hmm.
think India will become more like France today is, more globalist.
Globalist,
I,
yes,
I don't think it will ever become capitalist. It will become globalist because
globalist.
India's growth trajectory
Hmm.
will be determined by the amount of trade partners it has.
It has, correct. True. That is true.
And
Yes,
capitalists are not really interested in trade, by the way. Not all capitalists are interested in trade. A lot
yes.
of capitalist nations are interested in hijacking.
Hijacking.
So, yeah, I think India, with the nature of politics that it has, will
Hmm.
depend more on trade. It will become more like France or even
We
in
were
a
always
way
a trade
like
nation
Taiwan.
anyway. Our history has
Yeah, yeah,
always been one of trade. Always.
absolutely, absolutely. So there's a cultural influence as well.
Yes, yes. ठीक है. Anyways.
And you look at Southeast Asia, you look
Hmm.
at the influence that India has
Hmm.
in Europe, Western Europe as well now.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think it should be a relationship. And just before we wind up, a very
Yeah.
very interesting fact.
Yes.
Uh, so Odisha has a special armed police division. It's called
Okay.
OSAP. So it was
Okay.
called the Odisha Military Police in 1946. And later, after when of
Back
course
in 1946.
1946, it was called the Odisha Military Police.
Okay.
And after when the princely, the princely units came
Uh,
together,
uh-huh.
so it became a composite of Odia policemen and Gurkhas. So an entire Gurkha unit was added. The Odisha Military Police was comprised of Odias and Gurkhas.
They still exist today in our times?
Yes, no, the Gurkhas don't exist, but yes, the OSAP does exist.
Does exist.
It's become a much more minor force,
Okay.
but it's very interesting to know that this is a very interesting part of history, and I think I don't know if a lot of people would know it.
Hmm.
So and they used to be stationed at Nayagad and Jharsuguda, and the battalion headquarters were at Dhenkanal.
What we'll do now, Vivi, one of these days, one of our episodes will be on our own state, how it merged from a group of princely states to what it is today. There's a lot of history behind this. There's a lot of history we have to cover on Odisha becoming what it is today as a state, right?
It's a stunning history. It's a stunning chronicle.
Stunning, stunning, stunning. Absolutely stunning. The more I delve deep into this, the more I'm amazed by how we have turned out as a state. It is a story
And
worth
before,
telling.
yeah, and another interesting tidbit. I think Biju Patnaik,
Hmm.
back in the 90s, I guess. I think he claimed himself that I'm an Naxalite.
But that was for the
No, no,
Janta,
I
Janatan.
understand. No, I understand, but this is how, I mean, how dumb the left wing movement was that it couldn't use Biju Patnaik as his,
But to be honest,
as a
Biju
ladder.
Patnaik was the anathema to anything Naxalite. He built ports, he built this, he built
No,
that,
I
he built Odisha.
understand. I understand. Look. If I am looking for a brand ambassador in Odisha,
Uh,
and Biju Patel says he was an Naxalite,
I cannot milk
what
it.
better?
They could not
And
milk
this
it.
was in '95, by the way. This
95.
was in '95. I think 2 years prior to his death.
They could not milk it enough, I suppose.
I mean, Biju Janata Dal could have been the Communist Party of Odisha,
Yeah.
CPO. Who
But
knows?
yeah, I mean, who knows? But Naveen, I don't know he'll ever be able to say this. He's too elite a person to be able to say this. He is
Yeah.
one.
I don't think he can survive the troubles of the jungle.
Yes. Chalo. On this note, we'll wind up our episode for the day. Lovely talking to you as always, Vivi.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I hope our viewers, for your information, we have started a new channel, the Odia Perspective. It is on YouTube. If you search, a simple YouTube search will land you here. All our videos will be uploaded here, so it becomes a repository for all our discussions here. We will try to delve deeper into all aspects of our political system today, be it at the local level, at the state level, or at the national level. And like we just discussed a couple of minutes back, historical aspects will also be discussed. Let's see where this goes. We hope for your patronage. We hope for your continued support. So please do like this page. Please do subscribe to this page, and hope to see you again on on another episode. Right? Maybe VP will
It was fun.
it is always fun. It is always fun. We will do. There are two episodes which come into my mind. I mean, two ideas for the future. We will discuss Odisha politics and as in how Odisha came into being as it is today. And one episode, yeah, it deserves one episode on American politics and the Kamala Harris and all the stuff. Chal karte hai, we'll do this. Okay, fine. Chalo. Good night. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good night. Chalo.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Take care.